right, so chapter 21, verse 20, as we start the study, really we're going to discuss with these psukim many of the themes that we are studying right now in the Daf Yomi. So it's the synergy. Actually, these verses I wrote today in the Torah. So I'm aligned. It's not. Hopefully, it won't last that much longer because I want to put some distance in the Torah I'm writing. But this is actually what I wrote today. So it says, the pasuk says, "V'chiyake ish es avdo es amoso." A man will strike his slave or his female slave, b'shevet with a staff, umeis, and they will die. Tachas yado nakom yinakim. Then they shall be avenged. What does that mean? Let's see what Rashi says we're referring to here. If a man will strike his slave. So he says the verse is referring to a Canaanite slave. Is referring to a Canaanite slave or to a Hebrew slave. Says Rashi, the verse is going to tell us he's his property. It's just like his property always belongs to him. So to the slave is always, it's talking about a slave that he owns forever. So, meaning they were referring to a Canaanite slave. Now the slave is already included with somebody who strikes him and he dies. So why is the Torah telling us? Rashi asks the question. We already know that if you kill a Canaanite slave, you're going to be put to death, just like if you kill anybody, you're going to be put to death. So why does it have to tell us specifically about the Canaanite slave? So Rashi says to teach us the leniency, the law called to Yomo Yomayim. What's the law of Yomo Yomayim? 1 day or 2 days, meaning to say Shem lo meis tachas yado v'sham eis la'eis pater. That there's a leniency by the master, that if the master strikes the slave and the slave does not die within 24 hours, then the master is exempt, he's acquitted. That's why the Torah tells us about this law, even though we already know if you kill a Canaanite slave, you're put to death, but it tells us that there's a leniency for the master. The master is not put to death if the slave lasts more than 24 hours. Vashevet. If you hit him with a stick, Rashi says, you're talking about a stick. Verse is referring to if you hit him with something that's enough to kill him. Rashi says, or maybe it doesn't have enough to kill him. The verse states, be Israel, the verse states of a Jew, if he strikes him with a hand-sized stone with which he would die, meaning to say, or just like the Jew, which is more stringent, it's just like even when it comes to the Jew who's more stringent, and yet we say about the Jew that he's not responsible, he's not liable unless you strike him with a weapon that could be expected to kill him. Or a body part which you could typically kill him. For sure, the slave, it has to be that way. We're starting with the second aliyah today, Havs, because this is actually a review of what we're studying in Baba Kama. It's a review of much of what we're studying. By the way, if you want some chicken, or are you vegetarian? You want some sushi? We have sushi. It's in the kitchen. Vegetarian sushi. If you want to help yourself, or cookies, by all means. So then it states, so in that, it's page 266. Nakomi Nakim. Then if you strike the Canaanite slave, you will be avenged. What does that mean? Misa Saif. So this is a very, very important principle. I'm not apologizing. I'm not doing apologetics. The Torah does know of this concept of slavery which sounds a lot like pre-Civil War slavery in America. I don't understand it, that you could keep the slave, he's your property. But the one thing that should cause us to at least pause is that the slave was seen as a human being, because if you killed the slave, then the person who killed him will get the death penalty. It's as though you killed a free man. Misa Sayef, he gets the death by the sword. And so it states, Charav no kemes nekampris. So if you kill a slave, you get put to death. Unless the exception, and we just saw this in the Daf Yomi, is if you're the master and after you strike him blow, he lasts more than 24 hours. So even the master is not allowed to kill the slave. He just gets an exemption if he lasts more than 24 hours. Okay, so says the verse, Ach im yom o yomayim yamod, if he lasts 1 or 2 days, lo yukam, then the owner is not put to death, ki kaspahu, because he's his money. So the owner has this dispensation of if the slave he strikes lasts more than 24 hours. Why? Rashi says, first of all, what's the language yom o yomayim, 1 or 2 days? Doesn't make sense. Imal yom echadu patur, he's exempt for 1 day, al yomayim will call shekaim. For sure he's exempt for 2 days. And yom shehu ki yomayim, it means 1 day which is like 2 days. And what's that? Zeme esleis. This is from 24-hour period. Meaning to say, sometimes you could have a 2-day period because it's over 24 hours. Will you come ki kaspahu? So then if you kill him and he dies after 24 hours, then the owner is not judged because he's his money. But if somebody else kills him, if somebody else kills him, then even though he lasts 24 hours, he's put to death. So the owner of the slave is put to death if he dies within 24 hours, and everybody else is put to death if they kill the slave. So you're not allowed to kill the slave. Not only that, we're going to learn in a few moments, I don't know if we'll get to it today, but if you knock out his tooth or his eye or 22 other limbs, he also goes free. So the owner did not have the full authority to do whatever he wants to the slave. Okay. Next verse. Okay, this is what some of the sources for the halacha's approach to abortion is based upon this verse. Anashim v'nagfu ishara v'yatzu yoladeh v'lo ya'ason anoshi anesh kasher yasis alav ba'al isha v'nasan b'fluim. So let's try to understand this. If 2 men are fighting, v'nagfu, and one of them strikes the pregnant woman, ishahara, v'yatzu yoladeh, so she miscarries, v'lo ya'ason, but she does not die. Anoshi anesh kasher yasis alav, then he has to be penalized. Kasher yasis alav ba'al isha, what the husband of the woman shall impose upon him, and he gives it through the court. But we see from here that the punishment for killing a fetus is not death. It's a monetary. It's not even viewed as a criminal case. It's a civil damages. He has to pay money. That's the idea. You had a question, Hobbs? Exactly. And what did we say there? Damages. Yeah, that was, it scared her. It scared her. Right. Very good. Very good. Okay, let's see what Rashi says here. When the men will fight zemzeh with one another, because Aisha, and he intended to strike one, but he struck the other one. Vinagfu, and they jostled. Ein negifa lashon dechifa v'aka, means he pushed him or he struck him. As in penti gof ba'even raglecha, v'terem yisnagfu raglechem, u'even negef. And then there will be no fatality ba'isha to the woman. Anoshi anesh, he'll be punished. So the person who struck the woman's and he caused her to miscarry, even without intent, because he intended to hit somebody else, he has to pay the damages. And how do we determine the damages? Rashi tells us, based upon the Gemara in Bava Kama. We just did this. Bava Kama. Shamanosa, we evaluate her. Kama Isar Uyo and Makar Bashuk, Alos Bidamah Bishvil Harayona. That you look at a woman, what is she worth if she was being sold as a slave in those days? Pregnant versus not pregnant. And the difference is the damage that you caused her. And that's what you have to pay. I know She'anesh will surely be punished. Yigmu Menu Mammon. They collect money from him. As in V'anshu Oto Meya Kasef. They penalize him with 100 silver coins. So that's the amount that they have to pay. Meaning to say, how much do they have to pay? It's money. And how much? Kasher yashit alav kishayit benu abal badin yashit alav onesh alkach v'nasan hamaket mevladus. He has to give the value of the offspring. It doesn't tell us exactly biplulim alpia dayanim, the base of the judges. It doesn't tell us how much. But again, the amount they determine is by taking the woman and how much would this woman be worth pregnant versus not pregnant. Okay, next verse. Bimasonia, and if the woman will die, nefesh tachas nefesh. If the woman will die, then does he pay money? No. Then we take a soul for a soul. So under those circumstances, we don't pay any money. Rashi says, not so simple. V'masonia bi'isha, if there will be a fatality in this woman. Is it blowing cold air? What? I have to check out the heat afterwards. V'nasata nefesh tachas nefesh. You'll give a soul for a soul. The rabbis argue. Yesh omrim nefesh mamash. Some say what it means is if somebody struck this woman, they're put to death, literally. V'yesh omrim mamon. Some say no, he only has to pay money here. Why? Avlo nefesh mamish. But not actual money. Why? Because what we're talking about here is the case shemiskabin laharo getzeh v'hari getzeh pater memisa misham yorshav damav kamosha yanimkar b'shuk. So what's going on here is if Reuven intended to hit Shimon, he ended up hitting Shimon's wife and killing her. So that's what they argue. Does he get put to death? And some say that under those circumstances, he's exempt from death and he has to pay the heirs her value. So some view this that even though he intended to kill one, he killed the other, he's liable for death. Others say he's exempt and he has a monetary penalty. So if he's liable for death, we're not going to make him pay a monetary penalty. This is something we've learned several times already in Bava Kama. This is the principle called Kimwei b'derabi minei, that if you're giving the person the more severe penalty, then they're exempt from the monetary penalty. And Yosef has something to add.
I wanted to ask a question. Is that like the case in Makos where it says Zorek Even Lego, where you throw a stone over a wall and you kill somebody and you didn't intend to kill anybody?
But there you didn't intend to kill anyone. Here you intended to kill somebody, just you intended to kill the other person.
And that's better?
Yeah, that's worse. That's worse because you intended to kill somebody, you just killed the other person. Okay. Now we say the verse which we spent a lot of time on in the Daf Yomi last week. Ayin tachas ayin, an eye for an eye. Shein tachas shein, a tooth for a tooth. Yad tachas yad, a hand for a hand. A regel tachas regel, a foot for a foot. What does that mean? Ayin tachas ayin. Sime ayin es sime ayin chaver. If he knocked out his friend's eye, No tenlo demei eno. He has to give him the value of his eye. Kama shepachatu damavimkor bashuk. How much his value was decreased because he knocked out his eye. V'chein kuam. And in all these cases, v'lo netila sefer mamash doesn't mean an actual eye. Kamosh darshu rabosin parakachova. Like remember we had this on 83b and 84a. We had this 11 days ago where we discussed all the ways in which we know an eye for an eye is not literally an eye for an eye. It is a monetary penalty. Okay, and this next case also, this next pasuk was also from Baba Kama. Kviya tachas kviya, a burn in place of a burn, a petza tachas petza, a wound for a wound, or an injury for an injury, chabura tachas chabura, a wound for a wound. Let's see what it means. Kviya tachas kviya, michvas eish, means if you're burned. So what's the distinction here? Up until now, we're talking about wounds that have a diminishing of the value of the person. Like, for example, if you knock out his arm, Rahman al-Islam, now he's not going to be able to be a quarterback. But now we're talking about a place where there's no depreciation. What was the example of the Gemara where you can have an injury and there's pain, but there's no injury?
Blind.
A what?
Is it a blind person losing an eye?
Well, a blind person losing his eye, he has an injury. Oh, blind person losing an eye after he's already lost it? Oh, so that wasn't the example of the Gemara. The Gemara's example was if you burn the fingernail. Remember, when you burn the fingernail, you're just causing him pain, but you're not causing him damages. So here they said there you determine how much would a person be willing to take. And that's not exactly the Gemara. The Gemara said nobody would do that. Only a fool would be willing to take money to injure himself. So it means Gemara goes through several follow-up questions to that. Rashi's just giving us the start of it. You had a question, Hobbs?
No.
Okay, so Rashi's just giving us the start of that case, and then they said, okay, well, how much would a person be willing to pay to get the medicine? Then it goes through other possibilities. That was the start. Okay. Petza tachas petza. What is petza? Imaka motzi adam. This is a wound that blood gushes forth. Shepotzas bisaro, that he breaks through the flesh. In French, it is navrur, to wound or to grieve. Akolafi ma'ashahu. In the Yeshbo Pachas Damim, everything is according to the circumstances. If there's depreciation, he gives nazek. If nafal mishkav, those things shevas 3 boshes ritzah. If there's depreciation, he gives damages, and if he becomes bedridden, he gives lost wages, medical, humiliation, and pain. Rashi says, "Umikra zayater," but this is a superfluous verse, as we said in Achovel. Ubachovel dashur abosenu u'chayv ha'otzar afil b'makom nezek. So that means to say we have to pay pain, even though he paid damages. Even though he gave him the value of the hand, in pochino someone at tsar, he still has to pay the pain. So we're saying that since he acquired the hand, you might have thought that he therefore has the right to cut it off. We say, yeah, but he could have cut it off could have amputated with a medicine that doesn't hurt, and he used it. He did it in a painful way. What's a chabura? That's a wound. Rashi says, this is a wound where the blood gathers up, and doesn't escape. It reddens the flesh. Lashon chabura. The word chabura in French means v'namer chabar burotav. V'targamo mashkofei. Lashon chavata. Okay, next pasuk.
So about the namer, it's spots, right?
Yeah, Rashi refers to that. I skipped that a little bit, but he's talking about spots. Rashi says that. Hold on. Hold on. Okay, we go on. If a person will strike the eye of his slave or the eye of his maid, and destroy it, then he shall send him free in exchange for his eye. Now let me ask Hobbes. I'm going to put Hobbes on the spot. There are two types of slaves, right? What are the two types? Exactly. And which type of slave are we referring to here? Exactly. That there are two types of slaves, the Hebrew slave and the Canaanite slave. Who goes free by knocking out the tooth or the eye? Only the Canaanite slave. What do you do if you knock out the tooth or the eye of the Jewish slave?
Damages.
Pay him damages. Exactly. Rashi says, "It's ein avdo Kenani." This is a Canaanite slave. Every eno yotzei b'shem v'ayin. The Hebrew slave does not go free with a tooth or an eye. Kamo shamarnu eitza lo teitzei katzei tavadim, like we said earlier in the Torah. Tachat eno. Okay, boys, come on in. Come on in. Have a seat next to us. By the way, and afterwards, Moshe, we got good food for you to eat. So have a seat. Where's Ezra and Kobe? All right. So what page are we on, Eitan? Tell Moshe.
409.
409. Ezra, have a seat. We're on page 409. Now we're talking about the ways in which the Canaanite slave goes free. It's if you knock out his tooth or his eye, or 24 other limbs. What are the 24 limbs in which a slave goes free? The hands and the feet. The 2 ears. The nostril. And the tip of the gvia, which is the male organ. So if you knock out any of these things, if you sever the toes or the hands, the nostril, the 2 ears, or your male, you know what, then you go free. So why, Kobe, you know the page?
408, yeah.
So why does it say the tooth and the eye? Because if it had just said the tooth and not the eye, if it just said the eye and not the tooth, of course, I might have said anything that was created with him. And this is to exclude but the teeth are not created with him. The teeth growing afterwards. If it says tooth, it doesn't say eye. I would have said, even if you knock out a baby tooth, therefore it says the eyes. Okay. Next pasuk. Amatoya pio, and if he knocks out the tooth of a slave or the tooth of his maidservant, and he sends them free. This is the law of a tooth and an eye. Then they go free. Okay. Next verse. Now we're coming up to what we were studying a lot in Baba Kama. Moshe, we've been discussing a lot about this. As Isha Isha. Let's say an ox will gore a man or a woman, vames, and a man or a woman will die. An ox will gore a man or a woman, and then the ox and the man or woman dies. Sakoi sakel ashor. The ox will be put to death. You can't eat its flesh. Ubal ashor naki. But the owner of the ox is innocent. What does that mean?
What verse are we on?
Verse 28. We were just discussing this in Baba Kama. This verse is what we're discussing. Okay, what's going on here? By the way, I want to just say two things before we go on. First of all, since Thursday night, Friday is Rosh Chodesh, we're going to do a Friday morning, we pray at sunrise. And Thursday night, we're going to do a Tish at the University of Maryland. Yeah, that was a good schmuck Tish. What? No, Thursday night, Rosh Chodesh, we're going to do a Tish at the University of Maryland Thursday night.
Yes.
It was electric. We're going to.
I'm so excited.
You liked it?
I am really excited.
Yeah,
You liked
it's a
it?
nice place too. That place.
No, but I didn't like the vibe where we were at. We're going to a different place this time at Maryland. I didn't like the vibes. The vibes were like,
Quiet?
I don't want to, hold on, let me stop the recording. I don't want to criticize. I don't want to criticize, but let's just say we were in an institution. When you're in an institution, that it deadens the mood. You know, I feel like you get more Heimish when you're in somebody's apartment. You know what I'm saying? That's a more, no, there's rules. We live by the halacha. Yeah, it's not institutional. It's more ad hoc. You get more vibes. More chill. Okay, so we'll do the next pasuk. So okay, what does that mean? If the ox scores, so this is the law that the ox is put to death. Whether it's an ox that kills or any animal that kills. So if you have a gerbil and your gerbil kills someone, you put your gerbil to death. Your snake kills someone, we put the snake to death. What if it's your dog? Put the dog to death if your dog kills somebody. This is the law of an animal that kills. But it's stoned, but you cannot eat its flesh. Rashi says, from the fact that it says the ox will be stoned, don't I know that it's a nevela? If the animal is stoned to death, of course you can't eat it. It has to be slaughtered, shechted, in order to eat. So why do we say you cannot eat its flesh? Let's say we sentenced to death, somebody else came along and slaughtered it, you can't eat it. Hello, Larry. How do we know that you can't have any? I'm sorry?
The Talmud does talk about shooting things through projectiles, though, occasionally, right? You can do it with an arrow.
Right, that's a very, very good point.
You do it with a sharp stone.
You can shecht with a sharp stone, and the Talmud raises that question. They are excellent, Eitan. Excellent. Eitan, you're sharp today. Excellent. But how do we know that you can't have any benefit from it? Once an ox is sentenced to death, you can't say, oh, the ox is going to die anyway. Let me just at least sell it to somebody else. It says, Baal Shor Naki. The owner is innocent, meaning that he lost everything. You can't, once the animal is sentenced to death, you can't benefit from it at all. Shuto kamashmao, and the simple explanation is if the ox by Muad it says if the ox is gored 3 times, then the ox is put to death, then the owner is put to death, even though he's not really. Therefore, needs to say in this case, the owner of the ox is innocent. Okay, we'll stop here. Just want to remind everybody that Friday morning, listen here, guys, because it's Rosh